everybody. I'm Marie Doerner. As I said, I have been working for a long time as a learning disability specialist, and um, today what we're going to do is we have a warm up, and then a good portion of today we'll be talking about universal design for learning, the overview for that, and then we'll wrap up and close. Um,
Marie, is it helpful if I advance the slides or how do you want to?
yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Um, in today's webinar, we will hopefully identify at least one UDL aligned strategy that extends access and increases engagement for adult learners. Um, UDL, when you get started in looking at universal design and learning, there are so many tools in the toolbox. I don't think anyone could know what every strategy is, but as we start building our personal toolboxes, we can start accessing one or two. And so the objective for today is just come up with one or two of these things that will enhance your classrooms, your schools, your world, and discover ways to enhance your understanding and application of the UDL um, principles. Okay. So we're starting with a reflection, and this is in the chat. And right now, everyone should have put their name in the chat and the school they're at. And if there's any friends and family with them, make sure you tell us who those people are as well, so that we're aware of who's taken this class. So this is cool. So we want you to think about a positive experience you recently had learning something new. Tell what made that a good experience. The other thing that you could do is tell about the worst experience that you had trying to learn and what exactly made that a bad experience. So I'll let you start writing. Um, I I teach another class and we do this experience. We talk about this topic and write down student answers to the good and the bad, and come up with a set of class standards for that we all agree that we want to create the best learning experience for students, and so they get to state what was a good experience for them and how do we keep that classroom in the good. Um, so we have learning to weave was a great experience because it was all hands-on and you can see your mistakes right away and correct them. Um, the worst, anything that I'm expected to learn. Oops. The chat is so full, it's bumping before I can read it all. So that's cool. But you can all read. I'll pick one from the bottom. So enjoying the enthusiasm of the presenter. I think that's a really good one. Um, as a teacher, especially, or as a counselor, you're setting the stage for the students. So that's good. Let's go to the next slide. Oops. We started with the reflection exercise to think about both the good and the bad of learning experiences because these past learning experiences affect our current capacity to learn. Adult learners, those who have not earned a high school diploma, experienced learning disabilities, have not developed literacy or language skills, or simply failed to achieve their learning goals in the past, often struggle with feelings of shame, and they bring them with them to the classroom. And they're waiting for you and other people in the class to trigger them, or even the work itself. Helping adult learners engage with their conscious and unconscious feelings of shame increases their ability to learn. It's also important that as the educator, you carefully examine your own preconceived beliefs about what intelligence and ability look like, sound like, and feel like. Because all sorts of people cross our doors. Next, today's session is about designing for all students by incorporating universal design of learning, but with an emphasis on supporting adults with learning disabilities. So before we get into the UDL principle, let's go over some key points about teaching students with learning disabilities. It requires a delicate balancing of accommodating individual needs, maintaining, not lowering expectations for learner outcomes. It's super important to keep expectations high. Providing emotional support to students, although teachers are not counselors and should not be counseling students. Supporting students emotionally is really important, and helping other students, fellow peers, to support each other in this difficult job that they've taken on, and enabling learners to define, shape, monitor, and direct their own learning. As adults, getting students to do some of these things is really very powerful. Here are the definitions of what a learning disability is. I'm going to read the slide and ask you to put in the chat if there's one or two items that resonate with you. You can put the number in. So number one is the concept of a learning disability is valid and supported by evidence. A learning disability is neurological and individually based. Students are so different. Individuals with learning disabilities show intra-individual discrepancies. It persists throughout a lifetime. Some people can learn to cope with it better. It seems like it goes away, but it's actually just learning to cope, and it can come bite them at any time. Learning disability can occur with other disabilities, and it occurs across economic and cultural groups. Oh, I see lots of sixes. Also, we're specifically talking about learning disabilities in this worksheet, but we also have to remember that when we're talking about adult education, learning disability is just one category of disability, and do not encompass all the other types of disabilities. Our focus here during this community of practice is the learning disability group, but a lot of the principles of UDL will work for other disabilities as well. this slide is really talking about the students' rights and responsibilities. Adults with learning disabilities have the right to participate in educational programs without discrimination, and receive reasonable accommodations in courses and exams. Adults with learning disabilities who wish to request accommodations in the learning environment have the responsibility to identify themselves as having a diagnosed disability, request specific accommodations in a timely fashion, and they need to provide documentation concerning their disabilities. This is the proof that they have a disability. Students cannot ask for, well, the students can ask for accommodations, but school systems do not have to give accommodations to people unless they can prove and show verification and the need for accommodations if there are any needs. And this is something that students have the right to do. Oops. Faculty, teachers, faculty, schools have also got rights and responsibilities. So our students with disabilities do not have the right to disrupt class, because faculty have the right to conduct class without unnecessary disruptions and also be given timely information about disability needs. Right before this workshop, a student texted me and said, "Oh, I'm taking the GED tomorrow. I hope my accommodations are in place." And that is not timely. She should have been finding this out when she made the appointment. We did apply for accommodations with them, and we did send them all the stuff, but you have to be very timely about faculty need to have time to adjust. Faculty also have the responsibility to serve all students without discrimination and to provide instruction that is accessible. And accessibility is a big piece of it. Good, thank you. So this slide is starting to talk about self-advocacy and self-disclosure. I have a lot of teachers who get very frustrated because they have a student with a disability and they want to know, what is the disability and what am I supposed to do about it? And it really is up to the student to self-disclose and speak up for themselves. So we can go to the next slide. Disclosure of disability must always be confidential and voluntary. And I've had students who would be happy telling me about their disability, and I've tested them for a disability, and yes, they have a disability, but then explaining to their teacher about what it is, that's voluntary and confidential. The teacher usually does get the information about what accommodation is needed. For example, more time on a test or large font materials, but not the reason behind it. That is up to the actual student to figure out whether they want to let people know what that is. I usually try and get students to understand the benefit of letting their teachers and other people in the school know about their disability, because later on when they're at work or at home, it's also a time where it would be helpful if they could talk about what it is. Disclosure is a decision that only can be made by the person with the disability. And it should be helpful to the individual. So a lot of times students will ask me when they're in when I'm testing them, and I'll say, oh, you have a learning disability, and they go, oh, is that going to hurt me in getting my high school, or is this going to hurt me? And the knowledge about having the disability is specifically up to the student. And usually I say, no, don't tell anyone that you have the disability unless you need to. If you need more time on a test, then you need to let the teacher know, and you need to let the counseling office know and give them your paperwork, and you should do it ahead of time so they've got timely notice. But it's really important. If you're interviewing for a job, I would not tell someone I have a learning disability unless it's going to immediately directly affect the job, because down the road you can talk to HR, you can show them your paperwork and let them know what minor accommodation you can have to be able to do the job. So we have in the chat that our schools are littered with people with the learning disabilities, and it makes sense. Is why didn't you get your high school diploma before? Why didn't you get the GED? Why are you not educated? Why aren't you off working? And I think a lot of our students do have learning disabilities that are either not disclosed, not diagnosed, or they don't even know they might have a learning disability, depending on their culture. So we'll try and talk about that a little bit more in a minute. My biggest thing, and it goes with this self disclosure and confidentiality, is make sure that students know it's a safe environment, that this self disclosure is a safe thing to do, and then they're not going to get discriminated against. And I talk about disability all the time and try and help them see that it's not a bad thing. It's just another obstacle that they have to get around. It's not a doomsday thing. But they're dealing already with the shame that they've coming from the other educational things. So I think really talking up disability, explaining what it is, and that it's an okay thing, and that many people with disabilities are super successful in this world. And so the next question for the chat is, how do you maintain confidentiality in your classroom or in your program? And exactly that question, how do you encourage students to self-disclose? For me, I talk about it all the time. A lot of my classes I've taught are in the disability program, but I have to be super sensitive about whether students even want me hanging around them, because I am the disability person, and if they don't want other people to know they have a disability, then they're like a bit leery about having me there at all. So the question on the chat is, how do you maintain confidentiality in your program? How do you encourage students to come out and disclose? Yeah, files have to be locked up. Holding the IEPs in a private meeting. I was in a classroom this morning, and the teacher took a student out in the hallway. One way to maintain confidentiality for him. So some people are trying the self-diagnosis or self-reporting by asking, And I think in ESL, in many, many countries and many, many parts of society, saying, yes, I have a disability is not appropriate. My other student that I had this morning hid in his house until he was 30 years old. He just started our high school program um, today, but he's been around for a couple of years, and he got his citizenship, and he's been working on his English. But with his mental health disability, he was just hiding in his house. That's what he and his family thought was going to be good for him. But there's some great ideas in the chat. So during intake questions, we have, and another thing that's really important is that if you have intake questions related to disability, that everyone gets those questions, so that there's no discrimination about, oh, you look disabled, so I'm going to give you the disabled questions. So you just have to make sure that everyone gets the same questions. Jennifer said, I let students know that what they share is within my office unless they give me permission to share. Well done. I use the Remind app and send my students a message when I observe they didn't understand part of the lesson. I don't call them out in class. And many students do not like being called out in class. So if you can find ways to do that, that's great. Counselors can review transcripts and note the grades. Letting people know you're the advocate, and just letting them know that you're on their side. I mean, I go into classrooms and I go, look, we want you out of here. We want you to graduate. We want you to go to college. We want you to pay taxes. That it's going to pay our job, our paychecks, because we're there for you. Our job is to help you. And I don't think students always understand that. They're like, oh yeah, I'm coming to school, but so sometimes it's helping them. Front-loading students on the upcoming lesson is a great idea. Let them start thinking. I have several students who just want to know what's coming next so that they can already study up a little bit and not feel so hopeless. Other students like to come into the dark, and everyone is so different. Then we have one on organized groups based on skills or interest rather than ability levels. And mixing it up is a really great idea too, because mixed level groups are good, and other times you might do ability groups. Okay, let's move on to universal design for learning. We'll talk about instructional approaches that work for all students, including students with learning disabilities. We already talked about that not all students will disclose, and some students don't even understand that they might have a disability. So if you can implement UDL, it can be super helpful. One of the key ideas for UDL is that barriers exist in the environment, not the learner. So if we can create an environment that is better for the learner, we're not blaming the learner. And that's the other thing that goes with the shame, I think, is when we blame the learner for not learning instead of just creating a classroom that's more open to more people. And Alexander Den Heyer said, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. You decide whether to water it more or water it less. Most of us overwater, or whether we put it in the sun more, or we have to figure out what we can do to the environment to help it out. Um, Here is the legal definition of UDL. So, UDL is a scientifically valid framework for guiding educational practice that provides flexibility in the ways information is presented, in the ways students respond or demonstrate knowledge and skills, and in ways that students are engaged. It reduces the barriers in instruction, provides appropriate accommodations, supports and challenges, and maintains high achievement expectations for all students, including students with disabilities and students who are limited English proficient. Although the classrooms are full of learners from different backgrounds and with a wide range of skills and knowledge, there is a scientifically validated approach you can to design learning that works for all learners. Research shows that learner variability is predictable and can be organized across 3 brain networks targeted by the UDL framework: affective, recognition, and strategic. Um, Please put in the chat if some of these words or phrases resonate with you. Are some of these starting to go, oh, maybe this is a good thing? Flexibility, yes. We have so much diversity coming into our classrooms, and the lives of our students. Reducing barriers, and it's so hard. We don't even know what some of the barriers are, but if we could design our classes thinking about barriers and sort of front loading our in classes with the information, that would be good. So we've got including all students is so important. UDL is not one size fits all solution. It is not a checklist. A lot of people that, although you get sort of checklists with UDL, you have to just be careful not to use it as a checklist. It's really a mindset or an approach that will help you continue to be proactive and flexible in your approach to teaching. That as you notice something's not quite working, that you can tweak it and make things better. Why should we go to the trouble of universal design in learning? Learners in your classroom may or may not know or disclose that they have a disability. So we already talked about that and agree on it, I think. But statistically, you should design lessons on the assumption that at least some of your learners will need additional support. And in the classes that we have supported, our high school classes especially, about a third of them end up having verification of disability in our school, and I expect there's a bunch more that don't ask, but if we plan the lessons knowing that they're going to be there, then we're one step ahead of the game. Also, research into universal design for learning has shown that when we provide options and designs designed for learners who are historically marginalized in education, like non-native speakers and learners with disabilities, we end up increasing the learning for everyone. My sister had a student who had a cochlear implant, so she was deaf and she had the cochlear implant. So the classroom was fitted out with more
Cat T or Kathy A.
sound systems all over the classroom. And not only did this deaf student function at a way higher level, the whole class improved. And my sister was like, wow, I didn't realize the people in the back really can't hear me. And having the audio for everyone just helped everybody. And I think what you'll find is as you add these unit things to do with universal design, that's what happens, is more and more students are served, not just the ones with the learning disabilities. So it's definitely worth the trouble to include UDL. The UDL principles were developed by an organization called CAST, and it offers 3 principles that guide teachers' implementation. And what it asks you to do is really think about when you're doing instruction, which part of instruction. First, you need to have students paying attention and becoming engaged. So you might, if you've got students who are bored in your class or not really engaged, you might focus on some of the things that you could do to get them engaged. It's really the why. Why should we do this part of learning? The second part is called representation, which is how are you presenting it? Are you showing a video? Are you reading? Are you making them read? It's the what are they learning? Are they diagrams or maps, or is it prose? That's the what of learning. And the third one is really how are we measuring success? How are we looking at how are students expressing their knowledge? How do they tell us what they're doing? And as you can see, the pictures of the brain, each one of those topics use a different part of the brain. And the CAST people were really looking at what part of your brain do you need to stimulate to be able to do all these different pieces. So now the print gets smaller and smaller, and so here is where we want to say this is not a checklist, but it's giving you some more detailed information about the different pieces of an engagement. These are offer a set of concrete suggestions that can be applied to adult education classrooms, curriculum, lessons, learning environment to ensure that all adults can access and participate in meaningful, challenging, and learning environments. So they break down engagement into getting the students interested in the first place, how to sustain effort. Maybe you have a 3-hour class and they come in all gung-ho and after 30 minutes they're off asleep. And so how do they keep sustain and keep trying and try throughout the semester? And what are options for self-regulation? A lot of times I talk to students about, oh, I'm not the policeman. I'm not the one. I'm not paid police salary to be able to police your behavior. It's really to work with students and on your expectations. How can you help them regulate themselves? Um, so that would be principle one is engagement. Based on the recognition networks of the brain, we want to make sure that we are providing options and choices on how the content is presented. Use a variety of methods to present information and provide a range of means to support. And let's take a look about what each one of these means. So multiple means of engagement would be options for recruiting interest, would give students a choice. What do you want to study? Would you rather write an essay or would you do multiple choice questions? Talk about, yeah, we could do the next one. The relevance, why is this important? What is the value of learning this and how real it is? It's really important for school to be authentic. And then, like I said earlier, minimize threats and distractions, how to create a safe environment for students. And just because it's safe for one student doesn't mean, I mean, my student this morning is homeless and the tiniest thing can threaten her. She lives her day, you know, when she's not in school, she's on the street, and it's a different set of threats. So that constantly working on creating a safe environment, free from distractions, helping her figure out where she can sit so she can self-regulate. Here are some options for sustaining effort and persistence. And what you could, as we go through this, what I would like you to do is put in the chat what are some things in this area that you already do that is helpful. Relevant, it's really important that students know the goals and objectives and how this is relevant to their lives and their learning. Varied demands and resources. Maybe one book is not the only way someone could get that information. Developing collaboration and community. And again, some people love to work with others and can be great source of community for each other, and it'll keep people coming back because they want to come back to their friends, but it can also be distracting when they all start talking to each other. So it's a double-edged sword that can be handled very well. Feedback is really important. That's related to mastery. So students know when they are getting it and that the teacher knows that they're getting it. We want the self-regulation parts, we want students to be motivated. Anything we can do to help students be motivated, we don't even have to teach them. They'll start hitting the books and working hard themselves. Helping students, provide students with coping strategies. And I have counselors come to the class and maybe talk about how to cope with this, how do you cope with a loud student who's sitting next to you? How do you deal with being tired or not eating? Self-assessment and reflection. Encourage students the reflection about what did you just learn? How could you learn it better? What's going well for you? Back to those first questions that we had. Is this learning experience a good one or a bad one? And how can we move it all to be a positive experience? And we've got, I know this is a 1 hour thing, and we've got a lot of things to get through, but there's some amazing pieces of information in the chat. So here we go now to the how do we represent the information that we're wanting students to absorb, the what of the learning. So options for perception would be, we have the next click. Customized display of information, alternatives for auditory visual information. I know some teachers go, say it, see it, do it. The more ways that you can represent the information, the more ways students can absorb it into their heads, the better it's going to stick. And the more they're going to actually learn it, rather than the information goes in one ear and out the other. So we want alternatives for auditory. They need to hear it, they need to see it, and have opportunities to do it as well. I think customized display of information would be knowing your students. How are you going to display that information? So today I had a student who was looking at Manifest Destiny and the effect on Native Americans. So if you have a lot of minority students, you might really be giving them some information about their minority status and how they came to America, and then how they were accepted, and how that helps or hurts other people, and then how we can balance that out and figure out how are we going to accept all people. I don't know if that but we are always customizing the display of information, unless we just, oh, here's a book or here's a video. Every time you choose information to show your students, it's kind of being customized. I hope that helped. Options for language and symbols, clear vocabulary and symbols, clear structure, syntax. Make sure the font is clear and in colors that people can see. Supporting decoding of text, math notation, with making sure people have knowledge of what each thing means, using multimedia. Options for comprehension would be activating the background knowledge. And a lot of the things I will say to students, I learned about scaffolding in teacher school, and because we have adults, we can talk to them as adults and say that building on your knowledge is start with what you already know. So activate the background knowledge that you already have. And as you're activating it, you might find that some students don't even have that any background knowledge. And how are we going to then find some background knowledge that they have so that they can start building on it to learn to understand? developing patterns, critical features, big ideas, and relationships. And some students need that step 1, step 2, steps 3, step 4, step 5. They're very linear learners. Others need to see the whole picture, the big idea and relationships, so that they can fit the comprehension in. We want to support information processing and visualization. And most of all, we don't want them to learn this in our class so they pass one test. We really want them to transfer this information and generalize, so that if they learn to add in our classroom, then when they go to the supermarket, we want them to add as well, or in their own kitchens, so that that knowledge is generalized. Some really great things in the chat. So be sure to be looking at that while you're listening to me. The third principle, and so keep putting in the chat what you're doing, what you are good at. Multiple means of action and expression, the how of learning. I think has a very early options for physical action. As an early teacher, I had to adapt to this one really fast. You want various methods for testing people, access tools and assistive technologies, that they can talk into their phone can answer the questions, and then they can write the answers that way. We have so many tools and assistive technologies today. We're super lucky. And the next one is options for expression and communication. Maybe you want oral tests, maybe not for everybody. When I went to graduate school, one professor said, I'll give, instead of writing a paper, you can do a presentation. So that's a different way to express and show that you have the knowledge of what the subject was. Some people love to present. Some people love to write. Find things that stimulate people and that they are willing and able to show that they've learned what you've been teaching them. So that's multiple media, multiple tools, and graduated levels of support. Some people need a little support. Some people need a lot of support in the beginning. And then how do you wean them off of that support for later? And the last one are options for executive function. So you can see that this part of the brain is the frontal lobe. It's really about goal setting. And is this goal setting appropriate? Am I setting myself up for success? Supporting strategy development, and understand that including strategies is giving another set of things for a student to learn. But if the strategy works, it's worth it. Information and resource management. And there's so much information. We live in this information world, and then how do we manage those resources and get students to be able to use it correctly, appropriately, and so that we're monitoring progress. And it's really important for students to know, am I progressing? How am I progressing forward? What's going on here? What is one strategy or activity you want to incorporate? Of all these things that we've been talking about, is there one strategy or topic of information that you want to incorporate in your lesson, or maybe want to learn more about? And in the chat, it says, will I have access to these slides? We'll be sending a post-webinar email this week that will contain access to the recording of today's webinar, along with any links that were shared today. It'll also be posted on our website. Or if you'd like a PDF version, please let Sachiko know. I think the resource management is there's so much information out there, and there's so many resources to have, that it's important as teachers to be able to manage those resources and have it. I mean, you could have it as in a library format, but most of it these days is online. And how do you provide students with a meaningful set of resources without overwhelming them and having too much? I mean, you could have too little or too much, so I think you need to manage how much is appropriate for that student, for those students. And it's a balance between the teacher setting realistic goals for students and then the students setting realistic goals for themselves, and talking about realistic goals and what those are. And using multiple media in lessons, it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. I mean, if you have a great lesson on Manifest Destiny, but how do you then build up, oh, these are 3 or 4 things that I could share with students, and they could choose which one that they want to learn from. So I would start small, and that's your mindset.
Marie, there is a question about, having different types of disabilities in one classroom. How do you have any advice for dealing with different types of disabilities?
I think I focus a lot on the universal design things about what I mean, there's the obvious ones, like if you have someone who can't see, have them sit in the front, or have them, if a student is uncomfortable with people around them, I'd have them sit over to the side so that they can feel more comfortable and have more space. So part of it is knowing what each student needs. But the different disabilities, I really try and focus on what is the subject that I'm teaching and what strategies I can bring to them. And as many, the teacher I was working with this morning thanked me. So he starts his lesson now with a journal entry. And the cool thing with a journal entry is it doesn't matter whether a student writes 3 words or a student writes a whole essay. Everyone can do it. And so I think the more lessons that you have that cross that line, kind of where, okay, I know every student can do this. And then they're at different levels as to how they're completing it. Then it becomes an issue of how are you grading it, or how do you help those lower students, or how do you help all the students move to the next phase. And that's a difficult thing. As Suchko said earlier, that we have this is a 1 hour snippet of a huge area of study, and we do have CalPRO have other webinars and other workshops to learn more about this. So, Sachiko, did you want to do the next part?
Sure. Thank you so much, Marie, for your presentation and for responding to questions. And thank you everyone for sharing your ideas and what you're doing in your classroom. We really appreciate that. So thank you again for joining us today. And before you go, please take a couple of minutes to share your feedback using the link in the chat or the QR code on the screen. We really appreciate your feedback and use your feedback to improve our future webinars. And we have 2 upcoming webinars scheduled, one on evidence-based reading instruction in April, and the other on supporting adult learners post-secondary transitions in May. And we will be adding new webinars to our calendar, so please keep an eye out for announcement in the future. If you haven't already, please consider signing up for our mailing list on our homepage. And thank you again for joining us today. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much.